It's a final word with Adam Collins. With me, down the screen, a man who's turned out 149 times for Australia in one-day cricket, making 3,990 runs, 4 centuries, collecting 77 wickets with the ball as well. A CV that includes having made the fastest ton in World Cup history, hit the winning runs in the 2023 tournament, and of course, responsible for the greatest innings in the 54-year history of one-day international cricket at the 2023 World Cup with his Afghanistan miracle. And as of today, it's former Australian one-day batsman. It's our guy. It's Glenn Maxwell, and he's here to tell us all about it. Maxi, hello. How does it feel hearing that out loud for the first time? Former one-day cricketer.
It's a bit strange. I think back to right at the start. I was obviously picked, I thought, ahead of my time and sort of out of the blue, getting to play with some guys I used to watch on TV, and I was just extremely proud to play a couple of games for Australia, and to be a part of a change room that we won a series in the UAE against Pakistan, my first series, and that was an extremely special moment. And I thought I was sort of just going to have that, and I suppose go back to domestic cricket and ply away at my trade and play plenty of first class cricket and see if I could make it. But I've been able to, I suppose, go through the ups and downs of being dropped and brought back, and played in some World Cups, been a part of some great teams, and it's still a bit strange hearing that, but I'm sure it'll rest nicely soon.
I realised when we were sitting down to chat today that it's 6 months on from when your book was released, when we put the showman out there into the world. So, I mean, in some respects, we've done a lot of these conversations already, long conversations about your career, which have been turned into the book. But your call was to do it this way and us to have a chat because, and this I think is a really important point off the top, you're not a former Australian cricketer, you're a former one-day cricketer. So if you can just explain that distinction about what your ambition is now in T20 cricket before we go and do a few of the greatest hits.
I think my decision to retire from one day international cricket was probably more so on the back of the first couple of games in the Champions Trophy. I felt like I gave myself a really good opportunity to be fit and ready for those games. And the first game in Lahore, we played on a rock hard outfield, and post that game, I was pretty sore. We were lucky enough to have a washout against South Africa where I had a bit more time to have a bit of rest and get myself ready for the next game. And the following game against Afghanistan, we fielded 50 overs on a really, really wet outfield. It was slippery, it was soft, and I just didn't pull up that well, and started to think about that if I don't have the perfect conditions in 50 over cricket, my body just probably struggles to get through that, and it feels like it's a tiring affair just to get through on the basics of just of almost surviving the 50 overs, let alone I suppose being at my best throughout that 50 overs, and then going out there and trying to perform with the bat as well. So I felt like I was sort of letting the team down a little bit with how my body was reacting to the conditions, and had a really good chat with George Bailey while we were in the rain delay, and I just sort of asked him what his thoughts were going forward, and I just said we basically talked about the 2027 World Cup, and I said to him right then and there, I said I don't think I'm going to make that, and I think it's time to start planning. I suppose for people in my position to have a crack at it and try and make that spot their own for the 2027 World Cup, and hopefully they get enough of a lead in where they can, I suppose, have success in that role.
Yeah, I guess there is the temptation to hang on, isn't there, in these situations? Yeah, sure, you're 36, you're not at the start of your career, but the World Cup being 2 years away, as you showed in the Big Bash a few months ago, you've still got it, right? And that performance against England in the Champions Trophy proved crucial at the end there, batting with Josh Inglis. Also, the fact that you're on 149 one days, the extent to which you care about those types of things. 10 runs short of 4,000 in the format as well. I guess part of you would have been, well, one more summer or one more go around until the World Cup. But ultimately, as you described there, realised that it would have been at the expense of the bigger picture for Australian cricket.
Yeah, I think I've always sort of said I wasn't going to hand my position over if I felt like I was still good enough to play, and I think even post that England game, I spoke to Vinny, my wife, and said I feel like I can still play at this level. I still feel like I've got a lot to give, um, and I still truly meant that after that game. And it was probably only after the Afghanistan game that I realised it was probably a bit far fetched to keep, I suppose, reaching for that next series and keep trying to build up and keep trying to almost hold on. I didn't really want to just hold on for a couple of series and almost play for selfish reasons. I don't think that would help anyone, especially the team where they're moving in such a clear direction at the moment. And this gives them the best opportunity to, I suppose, have a look what their best lineup looks like heading into that next World Cup. And I know how important that planning is heading forward.
An interesting part of the book with you was talking about fielding, actually, and how taxing it was playing 4-day cricket, albeit briefly, and how that compared to playing short form cricket, where you could kind of bluff your way through a little bit in T20 stuff. Just to elaborate on that, where you still feel good to go in an IPL game, your body's fine for that, and why it's that extra 30 overs that takes it out of you to the point where you're stepping away from it.
Yeah, I think when you're on your feet for 3.5, 4 hours, there's probably a lot more lulls in one-day cricket where you're probably not moving as much and at high intensity. I think it's when I slow down and sort of almost rest for a period of time. That's when it's harder to get back up. But the 20 overs is a perfect time where I feel like I'm able to keep my athleticism at a high level and still be able to, I suppose, create plays on the boundary and still, I suppose, help the team out in a way that I know I can. And I just felt like in one-day cricket, my worth as a fielder was starting to dwindle in those last couple of overs because I didn't have the same pace, I didn't have the same spring, and I'm sure that there's guys that are going to be coming through that are going to be able to, I suppose, give that to the Australian side.
God, it's been a fun ride, hasn't it? I mean, going back to August of 2012, the 25th of August was when you took the field at Sharjah to play against Afghanistan, who'd be an opposition who, I guess your story revolves around so much, and we'll come to a couple of those moments later. But there's a lovely anecdote from Pat Cummins in the book, in the forward, that he kindly wrote that referred to you being able to size up Sage Ajmal, just watching one ball of his on tape and go, I'll be right. I'll be able to pick his Doosra. And I wonder whether that reflects just how free of baggage you were as a young man in the team who'd reached that stage way before you thought you were going to.
Yeah, to say I was confident at that age is an understatement. I certainly backed my ability, but I had no scars. I had nothing to sort of go off. I'd only played maybe a dozen games for Victoria, and I didn't really have any baggage coming into it. And I was coming in so raw that I didn't really understand the magnitude of what I was doing. There wasn't really that much of a crowd there, so there wasn't like it wasn't sort of thrown in the deep end playing in front of 80,000 in the MCG. There was probably only a couple of thousand in Sharjah against Afghanistan, and I felt like I was eased into it, and I sort of carried on that way until we got to the T20 World Cup, when I probably got my first real taste of playing in front of big crowds for your country, being under a bit more pressure, and yeah, probably being exposed to that a little bit, which was a pretty rude shock, and yeah, it was a quick learning experience that first couple of months playing for the Australian side.
And not long from that, it feels like the one-day game kind of catches up with where you're at. There's that crazy tour to India in 2013 where there's that hyperinflation of scores. You're doing well there, but it feels like wherever you were at as a cricketer, one-day cricket matches up with you at a perfect time.
Yeah, I remember that series so well. George Bailey had an unbelievable series, and together I suppose we batted together a fair bit. I remember, I think it was Ranchi, where we both got 90s, and I probably threw away what should have been my first international 100 and tried to work a single. I think it was off Vinay Kumar, and got my back caught in my pad and got out LB, last ball of the over, and yeah, it felt like there was a lot of things that were meant to be. James Faulkner, I think, got 100 in the last game off like 60 balls, and I think at the time had the fastest ODI 100 for Australia, and there was so many amazing highlights. Mitchell Johnson's bowling throughout that series, and then I think he went home for that last game. And yeah, we were sort of struggling to, I suppose, stop Rohit Sharma, who got 200, and there's some amazing memories from that series, and that was sort of, I suppose, the first moment where I had a bit of consistency in the one day game. I was striking the ball really well, and started to feel like I found a second home in India with the way those wickets played and the way I was able to, I suppose, handle the conditions and the spin. And yeah, from there, obviously had a lot more trips to India since then. But
Mm.
that was probably the first time where I went over there and felt really comfortable in those conditions.
And the way the game's being played cascades into the 2015 World Cup, which was no sure thing for you. And we detailed that in the book that it was a very difficult summer for you, 14-15. That a very important 90 something at the Wacker, which sort of guaranteed your berth in the World Cup. And then on Valentine's Day, walking out on the G and clouting 66 in about 10 minutes against England, exploding against Afghanistan over in Perth, and the culmination of that work, which was your first international 100, the big hug with Shane Watson, where you'd made Australia's, and I think the fastest ever World Cup 100 at that time at the SCG, and how emotional you were, and the fact that you were doing it with Watto and proving to the world that you were going to be a real force to be reckoned with in the one day game.
Yeah, I think that was probably the first time in my one day career where I was probably forced to show a little bit of resilience and a little bit of fight and grit, and the fact that my position was um, under a fair bit of scrutiny and at the start of the summer, and I got 90. I'm going to say 94 or 5 against England in the one day final. I think it was a tri
Mm.
series at the Wacker, and was just a culmination of perfect timing. I think we lost a bunch of wickets early. I was in early. Myself and Mitch Marsh battled hard to, I suppose, get us to a total, and then James Faulkner finished it off beautifully, and we won that final. And it was a huge confidence booster because I think that was the last one day heading into the World Cup. We knew we had two practice games. I think one against UAE at the MCG maybe, and then against
Yep.
India at Adelaide Oval. And I don't think I batted against the UAE, but I played against India and probably got the best 100 of my career. That sort of goes unnoticed. I got 122, I reckon, off about 60 balls, and barely missed the middle the whole time. And
Mm.
those two innings, the 90 at Perth, and then that 120 heading into that World Cup, I couldn't have been in a better headspace. Um, and game wise, I was so in control of what I was doing, and knew I was going to have a big World Cup, but it still doesn't change the fact that the first game against England was there 80 odd thousand people there, and you've still got to make it count. And I felt like the start of that World Cup set me up for the rest of the tournament, and then obviously the Sri Lanka game was the culmination of all that stuff just building up to the right time, and to have Watto there at the other end. The first game he was back in the side. Um,
Mm.
was such a special moment, and yeah, looking back on it just gives me a big smile on my face.
And it bookended your tournament at the MCG. So the runs on opening day, and then taking an important wicket in the final. If there was 80,000 there on the 14th of February, there was 95 there on World Cup final day against New Zealand. And you're a World Cup winner. You've done it on your home ground. You're a very proud Melbourne boy. You're very Melbourne in the way that you sort of see the world and go to the footy on a Saturday afternoon to watch St Kilda play when you're at home and that type of thing. To
We're
be able to
Sunday Arvo games, by the way. We're Sunday
That's true.
Arvo.
That's true. You're the death slot these days.
Yeah,
But yeah, more broadly, like that idea of doing it at the G, a ground where you kind of grew up at.
yeah, and I suppose my memories of the G is my first Shield game, facing Trent Copeland first ball, with, I reckon there was maybe 120 people there, at the G, and the echo off the bat first ball and hitting it for four, and going, how cool is this? And that was the start of my MCG journey, and to experience, I suppose, the highs of playing T20s with Victoria and Dwayne Bravo, Matt Pryor on our side, stacked lineup, and I was basically there as a sub fielder. And I think we had 30 odd thousand there for a domestic game, Victoria versus New South Wales. Would have been 14, 15 years ago, and just remember how special that feeling was to be a part of the Victorian lineup, in in the early stages of my career, where as I said, I don't think I did a whole lot in second 11 cricket. I didn't do a whole lot um, at Premier cricket, but I showed enough promise to, I suppose, be able to be picked and be almost that bits and pieces player that you can sort of chuck in if you need an over or two here, if you need a couple of balls faced at the back end, and if you need a fielder to field in your hot spots. And
Mm.
sort of got comfortable with that role playing for Victoria. And before you know it, I was in the Australian side, and it all just happened so quickly. It feels like I went that those couple of T20s for Victoria, and then next minute I was in the UAE, and
Mm.
um, yeah, it happened fast, and extremely grateful for the opportunities that I think it was Mickey Arthur, Michael Clark, and George Bailey having the faith in a young player like me who hadn't played a lot of games, but to get those opportunities early on in my career and make the most of them.
Another plot point here takes us to the G. Since we've released the book, a lot of people ask me about what it's like to work with you, and one of the things I always say is that the thing with you is you're just like us, like you are a cricket nut, right? You know as much about the game as any other cricket nuffy would. Indeed, more than almost anyone I know. So the reason I cite that is that Bill Lawry roaring you home to a win on an old school one-dayer on a Sunday night in early 2016 against India. You get 96 from 83. You try and win it hitting a six and hole out, which was rather annoying for us at the time. When we were writing for Deadline, we'd already written you'd made 100 and won the game for Australia. But anyway, I digress. But you having that moment it's a throwback to your youth, watching Bill on TV, doing things like that when, say, Michael Bevan was winning a game for Australia, and then it's you in there in the canary yellow, getting the job done on the G.
Yeah, it's funny looking back on that innings and seeing how like just naive and almost dumb and brash, and um, some of the shots I played didn't make a whole lot of sense, and um, there was obviously method to the madness. But even like you've got you got one to win, four for your 100, and third man's up, and I try and hit a length ball over long off, where it's probably the easiest late cut known to mankind. And I look back at that, and it's like that's just not thinking clearly whatsoever. Your beans are going. You're not concentrating. I had a fair bit of that throughout my career. I had a lot of, I suppose, people pointing out my mistakes, and I suppose the more mistakes you make, the more lessons you learn. And I felt like I had to learn a lot of lessons throughout my career. For the role that I was playing in the Australian side was always be attacking, try and take the game on, and try and be the match winner. And that was probably the moment that innings was the moment of I've obviously changed and developed a lot as a cricketer, and got to a point where I was able to win games where it didn't look like it was possible, and there was maybe a 1% chance that, oh, maybe if Maxi comes off, we'll get close, and then the rest of the guys. But to be able to sort of take us most of the way there, um, and be a genuine match winner, and almost get the winning runs, but basically get us to a point where we're always going to win was, yeah, it was a career defining moment at a time. I think, what was I, 27. So it was one of those times where you can either keep going or you get dropped and you're back to the bottom of the pile. And it's a long time, I suppose, grinding away in state cricket to try and find your next opportunity. But I was lucky enough to keep, I suppose, holding my spot, and keep having those moments where they kept me in the side.
Yeah, and that non-linear nature of international cricket, you experienced that. Dropped in the Windies later in 2016. It would have only been 5 or 6 one-dayers on from that innings we referred to at the G. I suppose back at home that summer, there's so much emphasis on whether you can crack back into the test team. That gets you in a bit of trouble. You lose some paint. You get dropped from the one-day team again. You're suspended, so on and so forth. And it's a bit of a weird time in your career, but you finished the summer clouting 78 from 44 balls against Pakistan in a one-dayer at Sydney to, I suppose, just remind people at an important time that you hadn't lost it. It was just a function of you being in a bit of a funk yourself.
Yeah, I suppose I just um, needed time away to actually work it out myself. Like to be there for a little bit longer, not have these flashes of innings of 10 to 25 where um, they look great, they look fine until you get out, and then it looks poor once you get out. But while it's going well, it looks great. But I was just finding ways to get out at times where if I had kicked on for a few more overs, the game is almost put in doubt. And those flashes obviously wore thin on the selectors at that time, and I needed to make some more substantial scores. And that summer, I made a couple of really good 50s and was able to, I suppose, have some important innings alongside other batters who were able to ride off my momentum and I suppose build partnerships a little bit more, not be so, I suppose, introverted in the way I was thinking about my game, build partnerships and bat with the other player as much as I possibly could. And I think that certainly helped going forward, and to not be so individualized in my thinking when I went out to bat is to I suppose work with that partner as much as I possibly could, and that was all part of the growing as a player and learning what I was doing at one day level, because I probably didn't have that experience in one day cricket for Victoria. I didn't play a whole heap of games for them. It wasn't like I'd played 150 domestic games before I'd played for Australia. It was, as I said, only a handful, and I probably didn't know the game that well, only what I saw on TV, and tried to replicate it in my own way.
And it's not long before that when Australian cricket runs into the sandpaper crisis, and that's like smack. You look back at it now, that's smack bang in the middle of your career, and your role changes almost overnight in the absence of Smith and Warner. You're very much a senior player in that side, and that's a challenging team to be in many ways, because you're not doing well. You're not having the success that you'd enjoyed at the start of your career. There's a very short turnaround time between then and the 2019 World Cup, which of course is the set piece event every fourth year. You get on an absolute tear before heading over to England for that. Your last 3 one-dayers against Pakistan over in the UAE, 71, 98, 78. They're all match-winning hands in different ways. And I know from when we spoke about that time in your life in the book, you thought you were never hitting the ball better than on the way into that 2019 World Cup.
Yeah, and I obviously made the big decision to forego the IPL that year to try and push my case to play Test cricket again, and felt like that was going to give myself the best opportunity to play further, and played with Lancashire at the start of the summer, and yeah, tried to give myself the best opportunity. And obviously, looking back, that it's probably a decision that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And as much as I had a great time in Manchester, met some great people, and it really enjoyed the county cricket experience of playing a full season and being the overseas pro. Obviously, the end result probably didn't work out the way I would have liked, but I was extremely proud of the work I'd put in during that time, from that England series where we lost 6-0, the 5 ODIs and the 1 T20, to that point at the back end of the summer, where I was able to, I suppose, almost get back to my normal role. Once we had a few guys with experience in the lineup, we started batting a bit deeper, which meant my entry point was starting to get a bit later and a bit more, I suppose, suited to the team's needs. And it meant that I could play a really smart, aggressive way of playing. It meant I could sort of give myself a little bit of time to get in, but then take the game on straight away, and give us the best opportunity to post a big total. And all the timings seemed to work out really well at that time. And I think Finchie and Usman Khawaja were batting beautifully at that time and setting us up for the back end, which certainly helped my role on that side. And I think Sean Marsh as well.
And it's all the more jarring, really, that having been kind of at the peak of your powers on the way into the tournament, that you almost lose your one-day career by the end of it, right? So there's the issues that that you've documented in great depth now, and I don't propose that we go back over all of it, but the perception with you and the short ball, difficulties for you inside the dressing room, the broken arm that nearly was in Manchester before the final game against South Africa, and a full-blown meltdown and breakdown, which the epicenter of that is the semi-final against England. So, I mean, having gone from the highs of winning a World Cup in 15 to 2019, feeling like you might be actually finished entirely as a cricketer, full stop.
Yeah, I certainly didn't feel like I was finished, but I think once I got back to Australia, I'd certainly fell out of love with the game, and just felt like it was all a bit too hard to deal with. And as documented in my book, it just all came to a head, and I had to have that time away from the game. And the BBL was probably perfect timing after that, where I was sort of able to slide back in and I suppose, ease my way back into professional cricket. It wasn't like I was jumping back into the international pool with a lot of um, eyes on us focus. It was a pretty cruisy way of dropping in, and then obviously COVID hit the following year,
Yeah.
so there was still a bit more of a break, but felt like the timing of the BBL after that, I was able to hit some pretty good form and play some really nice innings where I was able to control the tempo of the game and I was in a really clear headspace.
It is interesting that the second half of your career includes that time away that you chose to have, followed by time away with a global pandemic. Who could have seen that coming? And the next series you play after it, you return to England under most unusual biosecure conditions. Nobody in the ground, and in the final one dayer, you and Alex Carey walk out with Australia at 5 for spit and chasing about 300, and you rattle off your second one-day 100. And I was there commentating on it and watching you pongo balls into the point time and time again. It's a distinct memory, that big red box over at deep mid-wicket when looking towards the football ground. And anyway, being able to do something like that, returning to England, and again, it's like you've had moments in time in your career where you've just been able to remind the whole world, on my day, you're not able to do anything that can stop me.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of my favourite memories. I think for being out there with Alex Carey, he had a bit of a tough start to his innings, but once he started to, I suppose, get the ball in the middle of the bat a few times, it was great fun out there, and to be a part of his first one day 100 out there and to play a huge role in winning that series. With everything, I suppose, that went on over the last few months, not playing cricket for a long time and having everyone in a biosecure bubble and doing quarantine non-stop, it just made it, I suppose, all worth it and all. Um, it was just it was nice to not go over there for nothing and sort of come back empty-handed and to win that series against the number one team in the world at that time was a huge achievement for that group and put us in a great space heading forward and set a great platform, I suppose, for the group going forward for how we wanted to be as a group and the sort of people that we wanted around and how we wanted to, I suppose, conduct ourselves and hang around each other, be closer. Um, there was a huge shift in the way that the Australian one day side operated post that series, and I'm certainly extremely grateful for that.
And in some respects, a shame that there's so little one-day cricket played from that point for about 18 months from an Australian perspective. There's an 18-month gap in your career where you don't play any one-dayers at all due to just fixturing and bio bubbles and that type of thing. And this kind of corresponds rather with the build-up to you breaking your leg, right? So
Yeah.
there's even more time away from you, but there's always that motivation, right? And again, we've told this story many times, but the motivation of knowing that if you can get out the other side, there's a World Cup. And at a World Cup, it's it's clean slate. It's suddenly, even if the format's been diminished somewhat, at that interval in those 7 or 8 weeks, the whole world's watching.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing actually. Like even before that England ODI series, I remember training with Aaron Finch and Andrew McDonald in our own separate net at Junction Oval before heading over there as we were quarantining away from the rest of the Victorian players and preparing. And they were starting to talk about my role in the side and what it looked like. And basically, Ronnie said, "Look, we've looked at the stats. There's no one in the world better than you in the last 10 overs. So we've got to make sure that you're batting in those 10 overs. So how do we do that? You're just going to bat at 7. So we're not going to stuff around with the order. You're not going to be batting at 6 and then we're going to throw you up to number 3. It's going to be you're batting at 7. Yes, if it gets to the 38th over, you'll probably pad up, but we're not going to rush it. We're not going to, I suppose, try and manufacture something. We need you there for the last 10 overs." And to have that role clarity before the tournament and even see some of those stats and go, you know what, I have to be there. If that's what the team needs, I have to be there. And that was quite nice to sort of have that clarity from the captain and the coach at that time, or the assistant coach, and to be able to head into that series. And I think I started off, I got 70 in the first game, and
Yep.
and it worked beautifully. The way I batted in that game was all prepping around being there for the last 10 overs, and then it all worked out perfectly in the final game where everything just happened as I would have planned from ball one. So it's nice when things get put in place and you can reward that faith and I suppose play accordingly to how they want you to play. But they also said if we're 5 down for 50, we're probably going to lose anyway. But on the off chance that you come off, there's a chance that we might win. So
Mm.
so don't feel like you've got to go out there and do anything different. Just keep batting the same way you want to, and don't change your game for what the match situation is. Go out there, take them on, and put them under pressure. And that sort of clarity certainly made the next stage of my career um, a lot simpler and a lot easier, and meant I wasn't sort of getting rejigged around the order as much, and it meant the role clarity made, I suppose, in-game decisions really simple. And having made a lot of mistakes earlier on in my career, I was able to, I suppose, draw on those um, and I suppose make amends once I was out there in the heat of battle.
And gosh, it pays off. I mean, giving you a 3-year run up and knowing what your role would be at the next major tournament, right? So you end up getting both scenarios in that 50 over World Cup. You have the chance to bat against the Dutch in the final 10 overs. Australia are going fine, but there's going fine and finishing with 320 odd, and you get them above 400 with an outrageous 40-ball century. By now, I think Vinny and Logan had arrived the day before. You hadn't slept a wink.
Yeah.
You got a first baller the game before against Pakistan, and
which I should have got runs in that game. It was set up beautifully, yeah. But same thing, got thrown up the top. I think it was up to number 3, and that fell. Yeah. I just got way too excited and couldn't calm myself down. And when I got the opportunity against the Dutch, I was like, I'm not letting this one pass. I'm going to give myself a chance and try to just bat as normally as possible for a little bit of time and give myself a chance to explode in the last 5 overs. It probably happened a little bit earlier, but that's the way I felt internally. I was going to try not to take too many risks early on and then explode.
It was the first of the Maxi minis, I think, on Fox from memory, where they just kind of just broke your innings up and like, if you've been asleep when this has happened, make sure you take in these 40 balls, and you gave yourself a bit of a chance. And before we know it, you're reverse hooking blokes literally over the rope at third man, which seems inconceivable to normal people. But I suppose that's your game, isn't it? They gave you the role clarity that you could feel comfortable doing that, knowing that no one would judge you otherwise. There'd be no repercussions for taking on the game that, in a way that would, for other people, might look reckless, but for you, it was actually predetermined.
Yeah, I think having the backing of the change room from the number 15th person in our squad to the last staff member, whoever it might be, from all in between, everyone had complete trust that I was going out there trying to put us in a better position, whatever it was. And it didn't always come off. It didn't always look pretty, but to have that backing that, if it doesn't come off today, it'll probably come off tomorrow. And if it doesn't come off tomorrow, it'll come off the next day. So to have that trust and backing from the group is something that obviously took a long time to earn, and a long time of playing different sorts of innings to get to that stage. But the way that the change room, I suppose, supported me through those games, even after the first baller in Pakistan, to have that trust to go out there and back my skills and back my plan against the opposition. It doesn't happen without their support.
And going back to 2023 at the World Cup, there's another massive blow after the Dutch 100. You fall off the back of the golf cart and get badly concussed, far worse than anyone realised back in Australia, I think. And the next game that you're available for is the Afghanistan game. So we've talked about the formula where it's Maxi walking in last 10 overs with the Dutch. This is very different, where when Pat joins you at 7 for 92? 7 for 91. Of course you fucking know. 7 for 91 and add 202 with the skipper, 128 balls for you, 201 not out. I mean, let's not be too modest here. This is the night that changes your life forever, isn't it? And this is the reference point for your one-day career that'll endure, regardless of what goes on in the rest of your life, inside cricket, outside of cricket. People are always going to be asking you about that night in Mumbai.
Yeah, I suppose I'm extremely fortunate that I was able to have my moment of the almost everything that you've worked hard for, the peak of your powers, being able to put it in front of the world to see, and sort of it's almost like saying, this is the best of me. You can either take it or leave it, but this is all I've got. And to be able to have that, to be able to, I suppose, achieve that, um, that one innings that I think everyone is craving for in their whole career. That one bowling innings where they take eight, Scott Boland taking six for
Mm.
at the G. That one moment where they go, where people can sort of go, I was there when, or whatever that.
Mm.
I'm so fortunate to be able to have had that moment, um, and yeah, extremely grateful for the captain to be at the other end, for those two innings to be a cool, calm head, to be at the centerpiece of the changing landscape of our one day side, the how the change room is. He's been in the forefront of it right from the beginning, and he seems to be at the centre of all these incredible moments on the cricket field for the Australian cricket team. And yeah, I was extremely grateful for him to be out there. He had such a great influence on me throughout that World Cup, and as I said, you can't do these sorts of things without the complete backing of your teammates, and I certainly had it from him.
And the wider understanding, Australian cricket fans are notoriously fickle, and you've been on the wrong side of that more than you've been on the right side of it, let's be honest. But it felt like that's the moment where even your most strident critic, like, aha, that okay, I kind of get it now. And now that you'll, lead your post one day career life, where people will have that, not only that moment, but that moment especially, to go, oh, that's why that Maxwell bloke was playing for the better part of 15 years.
Yeah, it would have been nice if there was a few more moments like it, and but as I said, like a lot of there was a lot of frustration in the one day format early days, and there was a lot of learnings and I suppose growing as a person, growing as a teammate, growing um, as an adult really, and maturing, and might have taken longer than some others to mature into one day cricket. And but I think by the time I worked it out, I'm just glad it wasn't too late, and I was able to, I suppose, be a part of some successful winning sides in hard conditions, and to be able to showcase all the lessons that I'd learned from mistakes in years past,
Mm.
to be able to draw upon experiences, and hopefully hand down some of those experiences to the next group. The Cooper Connollys, Fraser McGurks, Matt Short. These guys are hopefully going to play for Australia for a period of time. Aaron Hardy.
Mm.
There's obviously a lot of good young players coming through, and hopefully they don't have to make the same mistakes. So I can hopefully teach them a few of the ones that I've made, and how I got through them, and yeah, hopefully they can have long, successful careers for Australia.
You end up having the privilege of hitting the winning runs in that World Cup final, the one ball you faced running out to the boundary, as you did in the 20 over format of the game in Dubai a couple of years earlier. But it mirrored what happened in 15, in as far as you taking an important wicket, that of Rohit Sharma. So we haven't really talked about you with the ball through this conversation so far, but 77 one-day wickets, but two in World Cup finals, and two that mattered an awful lot.
Yeah, I remember the Gupta one well. He started off pretty well, and to I suppose get him out early, he made a double hundred, I think, during that tournament as well. We know how dangerous he is, and seemed to get runs against us all the time. And to get him out at that stage where he could have exploded out of the power play, and potentially put up a big score, and would have been a tough chase later on with the wicket slowing up. And yeah, to get him out at that stage, well, bowling action and bowling skills have probably changed a fair bit since then. There wasn't much drift away; it was all drifting in, probably past the perpendicular. Nice cross seamer, hitting the top of off, and yeah, there's some nice memories there. And the Rohit Sharma, Travis Head taking that catch, the catch that silenced 100,000 people in that stadium. It was pretty incredible, and got us up at the right time. We talked about the 40 overs post the power play. I think that was the last or second last ball of the power play. To then put the brakes on for the next 40 overs was a huge moment in that game, and yeah, I'd like to say it was a masterstroke from Pat Cummins, but I didn't have a lot of faith in bowling that over to Rohit Sharma after he parked me, I think about 50 metres over the long on fence during that over as well. So certainly pretty nervous with the ball bowling to him, but yeah, so grateful for Heady taking on that couch.
And some of the most lively passages of the book when you got into telling me in great depth about how Pat set everything up, and you were just mesmerised by seeing that come to fruition. Only 160 runs scored between the 10th over and the 50th over, I think was it, wasn't it? Four runs and over from that point. And, being part of a team that you touched on it before, but going back to 2020 and those pandemic days and realising you had a bit of a special thing going inside that dressing room, and then being able to enjoy that together and realising that you'd won a World Cup final that really no one expected the Australian team to win, going back to those first two losses, and to do it so emphatically and to do it so with such a strategic bent to it, with the way that Pat went about it, bowling first as well. That must go down as the most rewarding time in your career.
Yeah, especially for how long the build up I think was into that World Cup. I think you look back to I think it was early September or late August when we were in South Africa. I obviously went home for that leg, but the guys I think played about would have been 9 games in about 4 or 5 weeks or something like that, and leading into the World Cup, and there was some fatigue there early, even before the first ball of the World Cup was bowled, and to get out the other side of that, where you're in India, you're in a lot of hotel rooms, there's not a lot of privacy, there's a lot of pressure, obviously, in the cricketing world at that time, with the way we started that World Cup, and to come out the other side of it, get on a good roll. Pat Cummins taking that decisive wicket. I think of is it Pereira? Yeah,
Yeah, the two
Pereira
wickets that
striker.
Cummins
Yeah,
got. Yeah.
like huge game changers. They were flying off to a flying start. Bowls Pereira, and then all of a sudden, like the ball starts to get rolling. We start to get a bit of momentum. Batters start to get a bit of form. We know Travis Head's coming back in halfway through the tournament. And it was all almost, it felt like we were sort of holding on until Heady gets back, and then hopefully he can explode for us. And but to, I suppose, get to a point where we could give him an extra game post the Dutch game, and then he comes in for the New Zealand match. Yeah, it was extremely special.
So the fact that you had that ability to get back from the broken leg, whatever it was, 300 days before, I think we worked it out to do what you needed to do. But it does prove to be a factor in the remainder of your one-day career, and not just one-day cricket, but generally speaking, you have to do so much management to make sure your leg's good to go at any time now. And that's also explained in the chapters about the amount of time you spend with ice and the longer warm-ups and more structured fitness programs to make sure that your leg looks after you. And I guess we kind of go full circle to the Champions Trophy, don't we? That you're able to have one more influential hand at the end there against England, batting with Josh Inglis. And I guess it's even if you feel like your body isn't quite there anymore, just knowing that the skill's still there, the eye's still there, the range of shots are still there. 32 not out from 15 balls to beat the old enemy. That on a in a high profile ICC tournament game, that must have felt good to do it one last time.
Yeah, and as I said, it gave me a fair bit of confidence so I could still play for a little bit and a little period of time, and probably started to look ahead a little bit more and go, you know what, I could actually play a few more, like a few more years if I can keep this up, um, and it did buoy me a little bit, thinking that you know what, this could be a possibility. I could make the 2027 World Cup, but I think in reality, I think I'd be doing a disservice to the team by hanging on for a little bit longer and struggling to get through, and more hoping rather than expecting to get through. And I don't think that would be fair to anyone.
So we shouldn't expect to see you teasing it out on social media that you're available for. You won't be going the David Warner route of always implying that you're available for selection, or the Ben Stokes, well, I'll come out of retirement whenever it kind of suits around a major tournament.
No, I'm probably more likely to delete social media after I finish playing.
Well, don't delete it yet, because I can tell you that you've well, I heard a whisper, and this will be true soon enough, that you've been nominated for the International Sportsbook of the Year, which is a bit of a thing. So
That's exciting.
yeah, it is. I think we're up against Djokovic and I think one of the really high-profile footballers. So we're, I wouldn't say we're a huge chance of winning because, but we'll give it a red hot go. We'll do plenty of promotion around it and see how we go. But no, it's an emblem of the fact that your story is a persuasive one for people who read it for the first time. I think that they get to know who you are in a very different way. And I know that we've done specifically the one-day piece of this today in this conversation, but it's been such a huge part of your life, and now to know that it's in the rear vision mirror, I suppose it's time for you to reflect and evaluate and take pride in your performances and those World Cup medals that you've got.
Yeah, I think I'm extremely proud of what I've been able to achieve. For someone who almost, I suppose, tripped up and ended up in the Australian team, it felt like from pub cricket a couple of weeks before, and then playing against Afghanistan in Sharjah felt like a couple of weeks later. And as I said, I was extremely grateful to get the opportunity. I had no idea what I was doing there. I was in awe of, I suppose, two guys I used to love watching growing up was Michael Clark and Michael Hussey, who I just couldn't believe I was sharing a change room with, and just found that it was I suppose one of those pinch yourself moments that I was extremely lucky to be a part of, and to be celebrating a series win at the back end of that tournament, and was something that I'd never dreamed of happening. I'd imagine playing a fair bit for Victoria and hopefully having a good state career, but I think the fact that I hadn't really put a full season together or a string of performances together that I felt would put my name up in lights, that my mind didn't really ever drift towards playing for Australia at that stage. And when I got picked, it was, as I said, I thought it was just a bad joke from my brother. I thought he was just prank calling me, and I was extremely grateful that it wasn't a prank, and I was able to, I suppose, get a early start on my Australian career, and get a taste of it, and then get hooked on that for the rest of my career.
Yeah, play with distinction, carry yourself with integrity, and make so many friends along the way. Maxi, Glenn, it's been terrific telling your story a different way today. You got an awful lot to be proud of, and a lot of people love you an awful lot. So congratulations. We're fucking proud of you on this show. You know that. And it's not over, of course, because you'll continue to be Glenn Maxwell, the T20 player. But the end of a chapter. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Colin.